Hello everyone, Mike Levin, May 23rd, 2018, and I guess Memorial Day weekend activities are starting to ramp up, and getting off at the ferry terminal here near Staten Island, you can see all the increased activities. I even have to rush to get to the other side of a tourist crowd here, so I'm not stuck waiting just across the street. So you'll notice a significant difference in my commute lately. It's around 9:20 a.m. I'll probably get into the office around 10, but my strategy is to skip lunch, often work on the ferry on the way here in a accountable way, using my private thought journals, which I sometimes copy contents over to the Pipulate repo in GitHub. So there's really so much I'd love to talk about in either this talking during my commute style or the long overdue talking head coding style. Now, a word on that. I used to do that with a program called ScreenFlow on my old MacBook Airs, of which I had a few, one I would keep at work, one I would keep at home, and keep the environments very synchronized in terms of fusion. Let's see, it's the PC emulator, or VMware Fusion, the big granddaddies of the VM industry. And so their Macintosh product Fusion integrates so well with Mac's virtual screen, 3-finger swoosh left and right on the trackpad. And ScreenFlow captured your keyboard strokes so well, especially compared to TechSmith's Camtasia Studio, which only captures like certain keys. There were so many things going for the Mac laptop ScreenFlow combo, even the size of the screen for readable text, that I did all my screen capture work on there. And that has tremendous ramifications on what is my main platform, because of course you want to do it naturally with masterful flow, or at least that 10-year progression towards mastery, which is what I'm in the middle of here, by the way. If anyone's following along going, what the heck is going on? Here's a guy who says after 7 years with Vim, he's only really just hitting his stride, finding his groove. So yeah, that's absolutely the way it is. I really listened to on Audible Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, and fully reminded myself why things are the way they are. It's one of those books, you know, so many directions I could go with this. I don't know how long I'll do the walk towards work, but one thing's for sure, I don't hop right from the ferry onto the train down at the terminal station onto the one or the RW, which I could take most of the way to the office. I could even hop on the 4-5 and transfer to the 6 and get off right at my building with all the Brooklyners. Or I could not want to shoot myself in the head and walk a few blocks in lower Manhattan, financial district. Everything around here is so iconic in New York, it's not even funny. I've been looking at which my getting back on the subway entrance was, and whether it still is within the time allotted for transfers, and I found that City Hall is just fine. I'm ready to get back on the train by City Hall. There's a few shy of that, which are almost as good, and the train station at, oh my god, what is that corner? Maybe I'll point it out when I pass it, but one of the train stops along here has been built up in like true Disney fashion. It's a destination in itself, how beautiful it is. A little bit Disney, a little bit Apple Store design. So, what else? Yeah, I'm nested. Stop me before I sub-reference again, as one of those SNL newscasters used to say. Dennis Oh man, all these almost good references. Well, this shows a lot about how the mind works and all the mapping that's going on and the linking together of different things, which in the end is what my field of search engine optimization is, and which is what all my work lately has been around retooling and calibrating around. Other sub-themes in my videos going on that you really should be clued into if you're following me is that I'm a tool person, but I'm also an accessible tool person. I love when high-end tools come down to the realm of the everyday person. I live for that. And the Amiga computer, my heart belonged to the Commodore Amiga computer, which as it turns out is in the lineage of the Atari computer since the days of the famous Atari 2600 or the VCS system, which introduced most of us pre-digital era people to the digital era. Our first exposure really was the Atari 2600. So I talk about the iconic things on my walk. So many interesting things. I've been, what do you call it, betrayed, let down, disappointed, had my heart broken by technology after technology. Just as you're reaching that 10 years, 10,000 hours of Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, bam, everything about that platform has disappeared. You know, it's happened to me several times even before the Commodore Amiga, including the Coleco Atom, which was serviced by the Honeywell company around the corner from us, and my dad figured, hey, ColecoVision has been so popular, you get so much value for the dollar, including that daisy wheel printer, spin, click, that could only do characters, alphanumerics, like an old-fashioned typewriter. That he went with that because it was a few $100s less than the Commodore 64, which I think, little known to my dad, was founded by a Holocaust survivor, an Auschwitz survivor, and was also similarly around the corner in Westchester, Pennsylvania, that I had subsequently got very familiar with. So, heartbroken Coleco Atom, heartbroken Commodore Amiga, heartbroken Windows, Microsoft Windows Active Server page as it moved on to .NET and its emulation of Java. Okay, so learn Java. Oh my God. You know, what is it? Is the deficiency in me, or is the deficiency in Java? Why am I not just starting to become good at this like anything else that you practice? I was incompatible with Java, let me tell you. Null static void, my ass. So my search continued, and in the background of all of this was kind of a ongoing project, various projects, iterations, evolving, shifting projects, starting out with things that were much like a tracking GIF. Believe it or not, my roots are in making Google Analytics-like systems. Back in the days when it was Urchin and I think Net Tracker and stuff, and the decisions were to keep or throw away all the data. It was well before the era of big data. A lot of times all your data capture took place locally from either parsing your log files or that tracking GIF, which had a lot of web serving considerations. So I did a bunch of things there, including the HitTail product, still live today. You can probably still use the tracking GIF version of it. But then over time, everything shifted away from tracking GIF, and I needed back-end systems to manage and control all the data, so I wrote something that was much like Ruby on Rails, years before Ruby on Rails, and under Active Server page, which went away, along with the whole platform it represented, active data objects. There's a whole grab bag of stuff there I was becoming really expert at. Bam! You know, heartbroken by Microsoft. And each time this happens, I like swear them off. I'm never going back to them, right? This is a company that has done nothing but crimes to the computer industry from the moment it stole the graphic user interface design from its big brother, I guess it's AT&T, no, Xerox, Star, the Star microsystem that did desktop publishing and stuff, the Mac before the Mac. And so after a tour of that place, both Bill and Steve Jobs go copying that GUI. And even Apple gets it wrong the first time with the Lisa. People forget Apple's mistakes. The Lisa, the Newton, there's a whole line of them. The trick is, just like those robots that back up against a wall and turn a little and keep going, like the Roomba, insect intelligence, the Rocky Balboa Italian stallion strategy, which is sprinkling in a little bit of randomness and behavior within non-lethal confines, leads to discovery consistently. That's evolution, that's mutation, that's all that stuff. So the idea is to, when you're in a dynamic field, when the static rules let you down, if you're not some sort of accountant, construction worker, most of this stuff follows static rules for high levels of predictability and reliability and assurance, which has a value too. So you can convert soldier militaristic reliability into things of value and charge customers for it. No doubt, it's always a valid path. The static people get forever more expert with whatever data on whatever tools they're using ad infinitum until they're the most expensive at that thing in the field, and you have to choose between assuredness and expense or taking a risk on noobs and cheap. So, there's versions of that in all fields and then along the entire spectrum. Entirely dynamic fields are just as weird and scary in their own way. I wouldn't be one of them for, all the money in the world. I'd be dead. Real spies? Oh my God. Anywhere where the rules are not laid out in a clear way. Anything having to do with invention, exploration, most fields of most areas of science, although that's highly debatable. Tools, dynamic, static, it's all coming around. So if this discussion, I went down a strange subpath, just keep in mind, you don't have to step back nesting out. If you find where it connects, you can just jump over. And our brains are not actually real digital computers, so you're not creating memory leaks. And if you are, you're gonna sleep tonight, and it's all gonna be resolved and worked out. So the direction I'm going here is that my field, search engine optimization, which I never really had that much respect for in the first place, is inching ever towards that, complete shift in what it is, the cooking of the frog, the small bits of incremental change until something is no longer what it started out to be. So Google started out as just the top 10 results, the 10 blue links. And there's stories going back to the dawn of Google that really hit home how this became the dogma and the religion of the company. It is the family jewels. It's the secret ingredient. Instant relevancy in an editorial sense. People hardly even state what it is that Google is doing, but they're playing the role of any old editor who combs through all the material, makes judgment calls on quality, subjective stuff, ranks and presents in seconds following a query that maps to pre-calculated indexes, hence the Google index, because you can't distribute all that data as a result of Google's exploratory crawl to all search node endpoints, certain places that Google search is answered from, which is a lot. But as technology advances, you can approximate that more and more, and that's Google caffeine and the distribution of incremental changes against the index rather than the entire index. So it percolates, and Google Pandas algorithm, which previously was applied every 30 or 60 days or such, is real time rolled in on those index changes, which is not to say that there are not bigger tweaks that come on 30 and 60 day intervals as Google does more infrastructure oriented changes rather than algorithm tweaks. There's so many subtle differences here. There's real hardware in the picture. Oh my God. I'm gonna have to just take mental notes of what to talk about as I go. I'll probably be passing City Hall, or did pass City Hall, so I'll take a next exit up. I'll see if my transfer applies on this far of the walk, but I really need to get these things out because what I'm doing right now today at work is like, how in the world could all this relate back to what a guy who codes sits down and does day to day? Well, to understand that, you got to realize I am not a professional coder or programmer. I am someone who codes and programs in the course of doing my actual job, which is SEO, which is increasingly changing to something else, thank God, after several attempts to redefine myself over the years. And I think it's settling in on data master, because it follows a very familiar pattern, webmaster, back in the day when the web was the new thing, and people are like, oh, what's the web? And there's all kinds of things to explain. The internet's not new, the web is. Here are how things link together. This is why it's taking off so fast now that this thing called Mosaic exists, and Netscape Navigator was spun out of that, and to this very day that we have Firefox from that heritage or legacy of code. And we also have all these new contenders like Safari and Chrome that jumped into the mix with their own back-end engines, and the extremely fast maturing of the JavaScript performance, reliability, and definition specification, because Google started using it for Google Maps and predictive lookup as you type, and so it all had to work. And so the browser wars ensued, things came along real fast, and then JavaScript became like the one language to rule them all, the unquestioned one language to rule them all. And had I been a little earlier in my investigation of where to move as my next technology platform, I would definitely be on JavaScript today. But when I was doing it, I found something called Helma, which was based on the Rhino JavaScript engine, not the V8 or whatever it's called today, Google JavaScript engine that pushed the industry so forward so fast, because Node.js made a server-based interface to the engine and the object structure of the server the way browsers have the DOM. So Node.js is just, oh, here's the object structure of what a server should be like, the equivalent of the browser, and here's how JavaScript maps to all those things and widgets in that object. So for automation control and user interface control and certain flavors of concurrent or parallel communication, JavaScript is great. It's like PostScript, right? You remember PostScript? Whoever learned to hand code in PostScript? Well, who hand codes in JavaScript? The thing is just to find the JavaScript library du jour and just do the basic copying and pasting and gluing things together and changing a few values here and there of, script kiddies. JavaScript is popular because the mentality of script kiddies is so effective in that world. What else? Oh, yeah, and also this whole infatuation that the JavaScript or full web stack people have right now with various other languages like CSS parsers, SAS and such, and not the SAS of the statistics, SAS, but SAS of, I don't even know what it stands for, but there's a few different ones which take compact CSS commands with all the programming commands everyone wishes it had and expands it out into the full-blown CSS throughout your, website. But now you have a rendering step. Even if it's real time, the overhead of the rendering cache, whatever, and it's more complicated. But the way JavaScript people fall in love with these tools, these sub-languages, is exactly analogous to the sub-language mentality of the Lisp world, as captained by Paul Graham of Yahoo Stores and Y Combinator fame, who helps incubate technologies around the world with like this small startup money based on this concept that like high schoolers with an idea who only need the motivation to show that their ideas have value will bear down on that work, that project, get it right, put it out there, and then the snowball effect will kick in. If they have something, it'll start to develop, and they maintain enough control of their company to feel like some ownership, even though Y Combinator grabbed a big bite of it cheap because they were willing to invest small. And yeah, so Lisp is all about sublanguages. When you need a language for a new problem, you go to Lisp and you invent the perfect sublanguage for it. That's where things like Clojure and Scala come from. I talk about Scala a lot. There's two different Scalas. There's Scala Multimedia Digital Signage, which was sort of a Commodore spin-off company. Not technically a spin-off, but it was a Norwegian company. I've actually hung out in Norway for them doing a lot of production work, print production work. Again, pre-web, post-internet. I was even on the internet back in those days on the Commodore VAC. So many stories. Gotta keep on track. So JavaScript really set in like pea in the pool of tech, the way an equivalent language, Perl, did in the early days of Linux, because they needed something more powerful than bash scripts to write installers, so everyone used Perl. And to this day, almost every version of Linux gets installed with Perl so that every installer works. And so Perl has this sort of blessed status as being built into the fabric of IT in a way that's really probably not going to go away, because most systems out there, they're taking advantage of the benefits of either Unix or Linux, which brings along this whole package of stuff. It's not the only computing flavor out there, Unix and Linux, but it is the by far most dominant winner, with many of the other things that lost being the things that I go, oh, my heart, my heart. So the themes of these videos is someone who's been let down and disappointed time and time and time again by technology, but somehow managing to keep myself balanced and afloat here in the midst of Manhattan now, which, you know, I moved here, lived over 10 years here before I moved over to Staten Island. I got some pretty good kung fu. I seem to be able to survive and handle and add value to, you know, other people's processes consistently. Whether it's New York agency world, where it's really hard to do because of the way it's structured, and in-house, where I'm always doing various forms of inventing. But all this in-house building has the same fatal downfall as any of the systems that I've built in the past, or the platforms that have gone away in the past, which is things corrode, things erode, things go away, things become, you know, no longer applicable. Code that even if they're still working, nobody even wants to touch. And even though the original implementation of Yahoo stores was in, I think, Common Lisp or something, by Paul Graham, after it was sold to Yahoo and after they tried to hire people to take it over, they rewrote the entire Yahoo store system on something popular and mainstream that everyone could work in, probably Java would be my guess, and lost some features permanently. Web stores, Yahoo web stores, just stopped being able to do certain things because they relied on that almost impossible layering up of sub-languages that Lisp lets you do to make the perfect code execution scenarios. That kind of computing goes back to a day where it isn't even necessarily Intel type processors or even ARM processors down there, but it's rather something called a Lisp processor. And there were a ton of these things back in the day. They were also part of the RISC movement, reduced instruction set commands, but they often ran Lisp as their actual operating system. Apps were written in Lisp, the operating system was in Lisp, and the whole platform was geared around it. I think things like maybe the HP Apollo, was it Apollo, CGI, maybe the Sun Spark stations. There's a whole lineage of these workstations during the days of workstations, the earliest days of CGI, Quantel Harry. I mean, I'm just throwing out keywords that I mostly know because of a friend named Mark Rifkin who moved out to LA and became part of the Hollywood scene working for one of those Scalas. But, you know, here I am, someone who falls in love with the special secret weapon aspects of a lot of these technologies, things they let you do becoming more expressive, being able to state complex ideas that can control automations, falling in love, getting better, platform goes away. Can't make a living being able to do that anymore for people, unless you kind of put yourself in a time bubble, which I did when I worked at Scala Multimedia, because they continued selling an Amiga product into the modern world. As they shifted over from Amiga to Windows, I did too, and the thing I positioned over to went away. Active server page, failed to adapt to .NET, failed to adapt to Java, had some false starts down the Ruby path, tried Ruby on Rails, hated it because I had created generalized joyful frameworks before it, and I was highly opinionated in how they should work, and Ruby on Rails wasn't it. And there was no client libraries in Ruby for all the things I wanted to do. So many people, including Guillaume, the vice president of Scala in Japan, who I found and recruited, tried to push me towards Python in 1996, 97. Oh my God, no, it might have been because Python is 25. It was at latest 2006, a good 12 years ago. Here I am 12 years later, 7 years into Python, because in those intervening years, enough people reinforced Guillaume's opinion. Guillaume Perroux, I apologize if I get it wrong. It's a French last name. I have such a difficult time remembering, but you know, an endearing friend over the years nonetheless, which is possible. Welcome to the modern world. Enough people, including Kevin Garrity, the VP of Analytics at 360i, where I worked, said Python. What you want is Python. And I'm like, yeah, but JavaScript, one language to rule them all, and it's an impossible argument to, argue against. So they were like, yeah, okay, fine. And had Node.js been out at the time, I'd have been a JavaScript guy today, I'm sure of it. But it wasn't. I found Rhino and Helma. So I looked at what in the world Python meant on the web, and it was weird. It was really weird. It was an awakening, and it's still difficult to adapt to because it is unopinionated. It is unopinionated. Certain things step in and control prevailing trends, like the decorator API technique stepped in with WorkZoig, and then the thing people actually heard of called Flask, the Flask web micro framework, and these @decorators, this design pattern, swept across Python web frameworks. I guess the main alternative being the Django approach, which I don't even know what that is. I haven't had my real Django education, but the two different camps seem to be Ruby on Rails type CRUD, create, record, edit, delete, something like that, or update, delete, Ruby on Rails type things, Django, DJANGO, or micro frameworks, which almost do nothing for you except extend the language in some super modest little way, so you can step in and actually just start coding with Python Deluxe. That's Flask, and that's micro frameworks. So the system I'm developing at work is a micro framework. I hardly want people to even be aware of Pipulate, except for it being the signature of my being there to help a little bit. Just one more thing you import. Import Pipulate as GS. GS for Google Sheet, GS for GSheet, which was the repo name that preceded it, from which I extracted this particular part of prior Pipulates, which has now become the main Pipulate, which you would do very typically from inside Jupyter Notebook, which is the tool of scientists who are remedying their crisis of accountability that set in also about 10 years ago. And they have subsequently been discovering Jupyter Notebook, previously IPython Notebook, from, let's see, from discovering it from wherever, I don't know, but the word spread, and they're all using either Python or R, which is also an open source statistical analysis language, inside a web browser on something that used to be called IPython, now called Jupyter Notebook, which makes processing the results of science experiments reliably reproducible. Because the crisis of accountability was that a full third of scientific research findings could not be reproduced. Given the exact same data sets, given the exact same research papers and notes, couldn't get the same numbers out. Big problem. A third of all the things that we base our core beliefs on, bullshit. So, scientists have been finding their way to Jupyter Notebook, often discovering the alternative language to R, which is Python, realizing that if they choose Python to do their analysis work, they can also introduce automation, system automation work. Now there's this disconnect then from Jupyter Notebook to scheduled automation. That's the second half of what I'm doing. First half being Pipulate, focusing on blitting information out of Google Sheets and into Python Pandas. It's a blit, back to the Amiga days or the Atari days or whatever. So you blit a rectangular region out of Google Sheets and into Python Pandas. You now have the server-based equivalent of Microsoft Excel, but without all the licensing and SharePoint and stuff that goes into automating Excel into things that's going to be never more than a brittle, is running for the next couple months and then forget it anyway kind of creation. Things you automate around Python Pandas could be running 10 years from now. Just keep all the versions from upgrading, and there's no reason it won't keep running. You might have a security flaw in the system that gets exploited, but it'll run until then. So let's see, Prince Street. This is important thought work, and I think I'm going to finish it and get it out before I hit the seat at the office and start doing my inspired work, which is coming directly as a result of this thought work, because Pipulate fades into the background. Yet that's one of my things I'm working on. Free and open source project in GitHub. You can look at it, you can use it. That predated my being at my current employer, predated my previous employer, goes back to the days of I guess the first version of it, different code because it's been reinvented by its creator several times. 360i Tiger, a system that I used to help get them into the 2012 Forrester Wave report by making sure that they had, useful in-house proprietary technology that they used on clients' behalf. They couldn't use the Search Ignite Ignition One stuff because firewall divisions and holding companies. So they used my stuff for their application on that report. That was me. I have a serious connection to 360i's history before the Oreo tweet, on the beginning of that ascent of being the darling A-list marketing agency in New York City. I guess advertising, it's becoming broader. Everyone's inching towards agency of record in the digital world, pushing aside the TV commercial-based ones. I guess it's already happened. I mean, 360i was already ancient history for me. So these types of systems are just what people need to do, and because it keeps reoccurring through my career over and over, it's like a saber-toothedness of saber-toothed tigers reoccurring so that they can take down more efficient kills with less energy. But there have been saber-toothed tigers more than one time in history, recent history, in fact. So it is with blitting rectangular regions of information around in memory. It just happens to be now it's for the purpose of marketing, and that rectangular science and now marketing. That rectangular region can be an Excel-like selection out of Google Sheets, and now you can be sitting on it like the data frames that scientists use as they do their mappings and transforms and formulas and modeling. And then as long as you keep your output compatible with your original rectangle blit selection. So that means you leave your columns that you're going to be filling in the template. You don't change the format, you don't change conditional formatting, you don't change anything about the spreadsheet. But the back end knows by certain conventions where to get column names, where to get input values, processes it in Python Pandas. You fill in values through that non-shape changing rectangular selection, and then you blit it back into location. That's pipulate. That's half of what I'm doing with my career now as a data master, because that's a lot. Because the things you can do Python side in a data frame, you have no idea, because data frame.apply applies Python functions on a per row of the data frame basis, or you can give the entire row as the input to the function. I don't have to invent my own systems. Pandas is my system. So Pandas sort of blends in with pipulate. Pandas is a dependency of pipulate. You need Pandas installed to run pipulate. Jupyter Notebook users who got Jupyter Notebook on their system by installing Anaconda version Python, version 3.6 or higher, don't have to worry about it because it's all already installed on their machine. There are a few other dependencies, but installing pipulate, pip install pipulate, will install all those other dependencies. So it's really easy to get started using pipulate and using Pandas by extension, whether you know it or not. And the other half of the work is the scheduling. And I guess I'll wrap it up here because I can't talk my hallway into the office. Although, it wouldn't be the worst thing. This clarity of vision in your head, this having a very clear idea about what you're doing and why, makes the moment you hit the office to do the coding work, the stuff people think you're doing all the time, but it's just as much this stuff. Let me tell you, you got to be self-determined. Automation is an illusion. There's no such thing as truly automated systems. It's, things you wind up and then someone comes in every once in a while to make sure all the machinery is still working and it's rewound and energies, so automation is an illusion. The closest thing to truly automated systems we know is, planetary orbits. The way the Earth evolves around the sun, but even that we know, orbits are not perfectly stable. They're either going outwards or they're going to spiral inwards. We're always in sort of this privileged space of where things look automated, and it's automated for all intents and purposes, but when we do coding work like this, something in Jupyter Notebook, and we want to lift it and put it somewhere else and have any decent sense of it's going to happen correctly every day, without us being a career DevOps person who knows how to do Amazon S3, storage work to warehouse data long term for trending, is a very difficult challenge. It's a difficult challenge to design a product that will satisfy stakeholders and not require heavy lifting from both a development standpoint and an operational maintenance and data storage cost standpoint. But it's possible. And just like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And so I guess this will be my seminal data master video, right? Put in your 10,000 hours. Read Outliers. I don't promote a lot of books, but Outliers is one you ought to read. Malcolm Gladwell. Know that I'm a son of someone who was in the textile industry in New York City as it was drying up. He had to become a check casher. He passed away. I took over his check casher store, had to defend my life in the course of running that business, decided if I could make it in Philadelphia, I could make it anywhere. So I came to New York, entered the field of SEO, joined a company where I created HitTail as my foray into the Web 2.0 developer world. It's been running ever since, helping bloggers mostly increase their web traffic in probably one of the most reliable ways still available today. So the durability of my systems, if not the actual code, the ideas behind them, are decades-long durability. I always spot the next big thing, and then I watch it play out and I'm like Statler and Waldorf on the sidelines. Well, I'm going to bring you my Statler and Waldorf, and I will, oh wow, I'm making pretty good well, Washington Place, I guess I'm near Washington Park, I guess, latitude-wise. Yeah, so I may end up walking to work. It's almost not worth getting on the subway at this point. 40 minutes into the video. I'll wind this up before it's 45 minutes video, but this is a good one, right? This is where I lay down all my principles, what I'm doing for people following along. Of course, I've been talking professionally because I'm heading into work and I got to focus my mind on all those things professional. Were I doing this on the weekend, I would be telling you it's Fleet Week and those boats are sailing in within view outside my window, and all of the music and food festivities are taking place along the little road outside Irby, which is in the Navy shipyard. And I have my daughter there through all of this. She's going to see the boat sailing in with her mother today as part of her homeschooling. I won't be able to bring her that experience, but tomorrow is her stepping up ceremony, so I'll be working from home and cutting out of work a little early to attend that, and making what I believe to be an incredible showing on my work on the professional front, so that I can take liberties like that, and take liberties like the upcoming VidCon conference that I'll be at, which is probably so not my people it's not even funny, except for the fact that my daughter is absolutely in love with the animation, the storytelling gang on YouTube. I'm near 8th Street Station. Okay, I'll be going through NYU and then Union Square, the first place I lived in New York City. I'm just walking up Broadway here for anybody who's following along. I'm at Astor Place. Over that way is the main NYU campus. I passed Cooper Union hereabouts, which is an incredible design school and a different life. I would have been a Cooper Union person for sure. You find where your compatibility and your light, you know, where people talk about, you know, being on the same wavelength. Oh my God, those people are doing some heavy, deep emotional physics channeling there. When you're on the same wavelength as someone, that is deep. You'll either hate them because you hate yourself, or you'll be an unstoppable force because you'll create a feedback loop of unlimited power, like all those brothers out there directing movies. You know, the Coen brothers had been my favorite examples up till recently. Now there's those other brothers directing the Avengers movie, whatever their name is. I got to get my names down, but you know, Tweedledum and Tweedledee. You know, that storytelling and hitting home with things like The Walrus and the Carpenter, everything you need to know about life because of their profound observational skills. You would think William Shakespeare had a brother. That is the kind of I lost my train of thought. That's the kind of media I'm encouraging my daughter to consume, so that her starting point is already the entire human condition, and then she can worry about the new condition that's coming about because machine learning will blend imperceptibly into artificial intelligence. And, you know, thousands of people, millions of people will be holding conversations with the same thing, whether or not that thing has human intelligence or not. Get it? That's Google. I'm retooling around that. What does that mean? Well, it certainly doesn't mean tweaking your titles and meta descriptions, I'll tell you that. Although that's going to have to be a truism for a long time, because the original metaphors, the original abstractions of any situation you get dropped into is first labels. What do you call things? The second is walls, so you can draw lines around things to label. And then the third is arguably time, the space in which things occur, time space, right? So everything circles around that, whether it's Lisp, which works close to that level, or Python that works somewhere in the middle, or SQL that works way over there, letting you talk in almost English. It's all the same underlying shoving ideas around stuff. So you should be able to make easy segues from search engine optimization to data mastering around Python and Pandas-centric approach, and that's all I'm trying to say. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.